last part of the series is passive debuffs, including passive nullifier debuffs. There's ultimately not much more to be said, as they work much the same as active debuffs, except with no time limit, of course. Notice where it says passive nullifier debuff. This means that the hero takes away enemy leadership and debuffs default damage and armor. Notice how the gold glow of their leadership from Aragorn completely disappears even with Aragorn present. This is very different from normal passive debuffs that come from lesser heroes or units, like Morgamir. So the passive nullifier debuff is the one that nullifies enemy leaderships. Normal passive debuffs, though, don't. They merely debuff default damage armor of an enemy, whilst a leadership buff would be active. Here, you'll see that Morgamir does not remove the gold glow of Dane's leadership, but only debuffs the default damage and armor. The passive nullifier debuffs obviously do more debuffing than the other. The most crucial difference about both passive nullifier debuffs and normal passive debuffs from the active debuffs explored earlier is that there is nothing to nullify them at all, except killing those units. It should also be noted that while you can use debuffs in conjunction with the leadership buff spell combo to debuff the enemy troops while buffing your own, the debuffs do not stack with debuffs, even in team games. Everything is a technical issue to do with definitions, but important to understand when you need to try to counter the enemy's boosts, or when you need to stack your own. Otherwise, good combos and counters can be wasted. This can be confusing, so here's the breakdown of sections A through B and the upcoming section C for clarification. 1. Weather-related active debuffs cancel only leadership and other weather debuffs. 2. Hero active debuffs cannot be cancelled, but can cancel leadership. 3. Spells cannot be cancelled except for Mordor's Darkness by only weather debuffs. 4. Mordor's Darkness spell is the only spell to cancel weather debuffs. 5. Passive debuffs and passive nullifier debuffs cannot be cancelled except by killing the heroes with them. And 6. Debuffs of any kind do not stack. What's the debuff system like in AOTR? AOTR's debuff system is, generally speaking, about the same, but with one major difference. Debuffs stack without limit, either passive nullifier debuffs, or normal passive debuffs, or even active ones. This can make for some very interesting good versus evil games especially, in particular if a player is playing Mordor. But more on that later in this series. The next section in this series will clearly show the impact debuffs can have in a battle.